So on October 8th of this year, Nintendo will be releasing the Nintendo Switch OLED model, a slight upgrade to the current Nintendo Switch that we have on the marketplace with a little bit of a higher price tag coming in at $350. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this system. We've obviously been covering it a lot on this channel, and this is obviously something that I'm going to buy as well. I have pre-ordered one. I ended up getting the white one. Initially, I could only get the red and blue one, and I was like, nah, I kind of want the white one. It looks different, and we'll talk about this in an upcoming video as to why I decided to get a Nintendo Switch OLED model, because we'll have a video that needs a sponsor and I'm going to put it in that video itself. But of course, the Nintendo Switch OLED model isn't something that is necessarily for everyone. If you're a Nintendo Switch owner who doesn't play your system in handheld mode, it's kind of a moot point unless you want some of the additional dock features, but then, I mean, you could just technically buy the dock itself. But of course, we are starting to get some more reports and more hands-on impressions of this as well. Games Radar just did a write-up on their experience with the Nintendo Switch OLED model, and it was kind of a mixed bag, you know, some positive things, some negative things. But now we're having developers themselves come out and talk about the Nintendo Switch OLED model and why they don't really like it. We also have a report coming out about the Nintendo Switch being an OLED model and some of the stuff involving the screen with that we're going to talk about in this video. So is the Nintendo Switch OLED model actually having some problems? Are developers not happy about this? And are there some design problems with this system? That's essentially what we're going to talk about in this video today. So if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, be sure to like and share the video. But let's dive into what's going on with the Nintendo Switch OLED model right now, what developer doesn't like this system, and what the potential flaws are with the design of the system. So Laurie In Studios is a company known for games like the Divinity series and of course Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate 3 was a game that was teased and showcased for next generation consoles, and of course we have had some older Baldur's Gate games, and Divinity 2 did come out on the Nintendo Switch. Well, Laurie In Studios was actually asked about the Nintendo Switch OLED model and essentially what they thought about this new system, and they actually had some kind of scathing things to say about it. So they said the following when asked about the OLED model. We have no idea what Nintendo has in mind, and even if we did, we wouldn't be able to tell. But when Nintendo has asked us for feedback as developers, we have been very clear. Either put out hardware with more power and memory, or the Switch will become like a new 3DS, totally removed from the real world. Now that's actually something kind of interesting to say because, well, the new 3DS did technically have more power, and the new 3DS wasn't really removed from the real world or anything like that. Sure, in a direct comparison with something like the PlayStation Vita, of course the new 3DS wasn't, you know, anywhere of that level of same power as far as raw power is concerned. But the 3DS overall was much more successful than the PlayStation Vita was. Nintendo is still making handheld related systems, whereas Sony, of course, left the market after the PlayStation Vita. So all because your games don't necessarily work on the hardware doesn't necessarily mean that the hardware itself is bad. It's just designed for someone else in mind. When you look at the price of something like a 3DS versus a PlayStation Vita was much more expensive, but the Vita did originally have an OLED screen, which is something we're going to get into a little bit further. So I think it's interesting how Laurie In Studios is talking about the Nintendo Switch OLED, kind of not understanding it. And I really feel like that train of thought does go with a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand why Nintendo isn't releasing a more powerful version of the Nintendo Switch, when realistically that's probably the biggest problem that's holding the Nintendo Switch back from some of these games. To some extent, I do agree with it because of the fact that, of course, third-party games are sort of missing out on the Switch because of the fact that it's not quite as powerful of a system as something like the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, never mind the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. So I can understand why some developers are frustrated with this, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, you see the Nintendo Switch is selling well, so if you want to put your games on that system, you will find a way. Sure, they might not be as visually impressive as something that you would have running on the PlayStation 5, but if you think that your games can sell on this system, then you would find a way to put your games on this system. Nintendo isn't stupid, you know? They're not a bunch of morons running around the offices there not knowing what they're doing. For some reason, they see the Nintendo Switch OLED as a smart move. It could be due to the fact that, of course, you have all these Tegra X1 chips that Nintendo essentially bought. They essentially bought like a bulk of like 30 million of these chips, which is the chip used in the Nintendo Switch model. Of course, there are rumors that the Nvidia whole, you know, Lovelace thing that's coming out could be involved with the Nintendo Switch. I'm not quite sure what I think about that. I've sort of looked into it, but I don't really know if there's a whole lot going on there. But it does make sense for Nintendo to buy up these chips and want to use these chips. And what better way than sort of a little hardware refresh as far as the portable side of things is concerned. Now, you could say, well, the Switch Lite was a refresh for the portable side of things as well. Why are they sort of ignoring the people who play it as a home console? I don't know. I don't work at Nintendo. But I do think it's interesting that some developers are frustrated with the fact that the Nintendo Switch OLED model doesn't do a power increase, much like Bloomberg said that the next Nintendo Switch model was going to do. Of course, there are still rumors that there is a Nintendo Switch Pro or Nintendo Switch Revision focused on power that could be coming in the future, but just taking that off the table, we have the Nintendo Switch OLED model. This is the model that we have going into the marketplace in the future, so I can understand why developers are frustrated with this. I think developers want to put their games on the Nintendo Switch, but you sort of have to factor in, is it worth the time and the effort? Will we see the rebound in sales for our game if we decide to put it on the Nintendo Switch? Because obviously you do have to put a lot of effort into this port of the game, but then again, we have seen third-party games sell very well on the Switch, so it's a weird thing. And then there are some concerns about the design of the Nintendo Switch OLED model itself, really boiling down to the screen being used in it. Now, of course, the OLED screen is going to make for a much better handheld experience in terms of things like clarity and brightness when it comes to the system, but there are some concerns about the screen being an OLED screen. Now, OLED is obviously better than LCD, but there are some problems that OLED screens have, much kind of like what we saw back in the day with plasma televisions. You remember when plasma televisions were like the wave of the future before we got all these other technologies in there? Now, while plasma screens were better in terms of visuals than what we had on the marketplace at that time, there was sort of a design flaw with it, and that was within the screen itself. Basically, if you had something like a stagnant image on your television for a long period of time, it would essentially burn into the plasma screen, meaning that even when you turned it off or watched something else, there would still be that sort of ghost image of what was previously being watched or consumed on your television before then, because of the way the plasma screen was, of course, designed. Now, OLED screens don't necessarily have that same sort of things, but it is a concern about something that an image being put too long on the OLED screen being burned into it essentially on your Nintendo Switch in handheld mode. So Nintendo actually addressed this concern directly and said the following about this. We've designed the OLED screen to aim for longevity as much as possible, but OLED displays can experience image retention if subject due to static visuals over a long period of time. However, users can take preventative measures to preserve the screen by utilizing features included in the Nintendo Switch systems by default, such as an auto brightness function to prevent the screen from getting too bright, and the auto sleep function to go into auto sleep mode after short periods of time. Now, I do feel like most of us are smart enough to know that most screens are subjected to this sort of thing, and that's sort of the reason why you don't want to have your brightness cranked up too high, because you could get things like image retention in your screens. But I do think it's going to be very interesting because someone is going to get their hands on a Nintendo Switch OLED model and try to get the image burned in the screen. Now, I can't really think of many games that utilize something where it's constantly on the screen as a stagnant image versus something that's more dynamic and moving and things of that nature. Of course, if you open up a pause menu, if you do anything on your Nintendo Switch, but besides playing whatever game you're playing that could potentially have a static image on there, it would sort of refresh that. So I will be curious to see though, because I feel like someone out there is going to see how long a stagnant image can stay on the Nintendo Switch and not get burned into the screen. Like, what's the sort of threshold here? Are we talking minutes? Are we talking hours? It really sort of depends. Now, is this going to be a widespread issue? No, I feel like 99.9% of people who pick up a Nintendo Switch OLED understand that you can't have a static image on the screen for more than a certain amount of time, so they're not going to do something like let this happen. Of course, you do have the features built into the system, the auto brightness, the auto sleep mode. I mean, my Nintendo Switch goes to sleep after a few minutes of inactivity. Like, it's just smart from a battery perspective, not even factoring in the screen itself. What does all this mean for the Nintendo Switch OLED model? There's much ado about nothing. Developers that are frustrated with the system and the hardware itself, they're gonna find a way to put their games on the Nintendo Switch if they really want to, if they think there's a marketplace for it. If they don't think there's a market for it on the system, then they're not gonna put their games on there. It's the tale old as time. It's something that we've seen time and time again. I mean, there's a lot of RPGs that don't go on the Xbox brand of systems. Is that because the Xbox isn't capable of running the games? No, it's because the market, according to researchers and people and previous game sales that we've seen screen for certain games on the Xbox just aren't there, so developers don't put their games on the system. And the whole OLED image retention thing, is it going to be a widespread problem? No. If you have a brain, you understand how screens work. Even if you don't have a brain, I feel like you are smart enough to realize, hey, a stagnant image on the screen probably isn't good for long periods of time because, well, you're a smart individual and you watch the RGT85 channel, right? Right. So those are my thoughts on the latest hubbub about the Nintendo Switch OLED, the problems potentially plaguing it. Is it a system for everyone? Definitely not. If you don't play your system in handheld mode, this is a completely pointless system to you. But like I said, I did pick one up and we'll go over my reasons why a little bit later on in the month. So let me know what you think of all of this. Are you surprised that a developer is saying, oh, our game won't run on the Nintendo Switch, we wish it had more power? Because I feel like we've been talking about that with Nintendo since like the Wii era at this point. And the OLED concerns. Do you feel that your images are going to be burned forever on your Nintendo Switch OLED model? I mean, like, it could be like a creative way to ask like a chick to or dude to marry you or something like that, like burn it into the screen and then hand them your Nintendo Switch OLED. And you gotta think outside the box with shit like this these days. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share the video as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.